Step out of the car! Now! Officer Ryan Hayes's voice ripped through the drizzle like a blade. His hand was already on his gun, his eyes glassy, his uniform damp under the pulsing red and blue lights. The black Mercedes in front of him idled, wipers dragging across the windshield, rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Inside sat Marcus Johnson, Chicago's chief of police, still wearing his badge on the dash, still gripping the steering wheel like a man who knew the law and knew it might not save him tonight. Ryan didn't care. His finger twitched near the holster. He leaned closer. Smirking, I said, "Get out before I drag you out myself." Before going into this story, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. And give this video a like. Because what happens next isn't fiction. It's a mirror. A reminder that one decision under flashing lights can expose the soul of a city. Marcus had worked 27 years for the Chicago Police Department. He'd seen enough blood, betrayal, and bureaucracy to fill 10 careers. That night, he wasn't out for glory or politics. He was driving home, exhausted, clutching a confidential folder on the passenger seat. A thick file marked Internal Trafficking, Bennett, Kyle. He'd been quietly investigating an arms ring buried inside his own department for months. The report detailed serial numbers of missing rifles, forged evidence logs, and the names of officers tied to gun sales in South Side alleys. Marcus planned to turn it over to the federal inspector the next morning, but he never made it home. Ryan Hayes was 8 months out of the academy, still fueled by his father's bitterness. His old man, a retired cop forced out during the consent decree, had filled his head with poison, stories of soft chiefs and political puppets. Ryan believed every word. He'd been drinking from a silver flask hidden in a water bottle, whiskey cutting through the chill as he patrolled 79th Street alone. When a sleek black Mercedes rolled past with one brake light dim, he saw opportunity, not coincidence. He texted his friend and mentor, Kyle Bennett. "Big fish tonight. Might be our guy." Kyle responded instantly, "Make it quick. Call me if it's worth it." Marcus noticed the flashing lights in his rearview mirror, the blue haze rippling against the wet pavement. He sighed. Another night, another stop. He rolled down his window, resting both hands on the wheel, every move deliberate. He'd taught younger officers to do this during community workshops. Stay calm, stay visible, keep your voice measured. He never imagined he'd have to use his own training to survive. Ryan swaggered to the window, voice dripping with contempt, license and registration. Marcus tilted his head. "Officer, I'm Chief Johnson. You can call dispatch to confirm." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I don't care who you say you are. Step out." Marcus studied him. Young, restless, eyes darting. He smelled the faint sting of alcohol and arrogance. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Ryan slammed his flashlight against the door. "You want to keep talking, or you want to walk out?" Marcus unlocked the door slowly, stepping into the cold drizzle, breath fogging under the lights. The wind carried the hum of an approaching engine. Kyle's patrol SUV sliding in from the corner, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Ryan grinned like a man who just summoned his audience. Kyle Bennett, 30, sharp-jawed, calm, and dangerous. Stepped out and glanced at Marcus without recognition, or pretended not to recognize him. He'd been under Marcus's scrutiny for weeks. Aware the chief was close to blowing open the arms racket, tonight was his chance to silence him. "Problem here." "Rookie?" Kyle asked. "Hand on his holster." Ryan spat. "Broken taillight. Driver's resisting." Marcus exhaled. "That's a lie." Kyle smiled thinly. "Then you won't mind cooperating." Rain dripped from Marcus's collar. "You two are walking into something you don't understand," he said. "I have a file that—" Ryan cut him off with a shove. "Don't tell me what I don't understand." The shove became a grip, then a yank. Marcus stumbled, his shoulder slamming against the hood. "You're assaulting a superior officer," he said, still calm, still measured. But Kyle's presence emboldened Ryan. The rookie's fear turned into anger, the kind that feeds on silence. He struck Marcus across the face with his forearm. The sound cracked louder than thunder. Blood smeared the hood, washed thin by the rain. A block away, an Uber driver named Jamal Carter slowed his car at the flashing lights. His passenger, a young nurse headed home, told him to keep moving, but Jamal's instincts told him something was wrong. He parked a few feet away, phone hidden in his jacket, camera on, streaming to his followers on X, South Side, 79th Street. He whispered, "Looks like another bad stop." Marcus straightened, one hand raised. "Hayes, that's enough." Ryan's pulse raced. He turned to Kyle for approval. Kyle nodded once. "Put him down." What followed lasted less than 5 minutes. Ryan hit him again, then again, the sound of rain mixing with flesh and steel. Kyle joined in, boots crashing against ribs already broken. Marcus gasped for air, blood foaming at his lips. Jamal whispered into his phone, voice trembling. "They're beating someone. Wait! Oh my God, that's Chief Marcus Johnson!" The comments section erupted in real time. Within seconds, 500,000 viewers were watching the stream. Marcus collapsed against the pavement, his hand clutching the folder that had slipped from his jacket. Pages fluttered out. Serial numbers, photos, signatures. Kyle saw them, froze, and cursed under his breath. "He knows," he muttered. Ryan didn't hear. He was too busy screaming, "Stop resisting," to a man who couldn't even breathe. Elena Ramirez was on duty less than 2 miles away when the dispatch call came through. Officer requests backup. 79th and Wallace, possible assault suspect. She recognized Ryan's unit number and sped through the rain, tires slicing puddles, heart pounding. When she arrived, Marcus was face down, motionless. Ryan stood above him, breathing hard. Kyle looked pale, guilt carving lines into his face. Elena jumped out, her voice cutting through the static. "What the hell are you doing? That's the chief." Ryan froze, color draining from his skin. Kyle whispered, "Body cams. Turn them off." Elena's phone was already recording. She caught Kyle's voice clearly. "Delete the footage, now." In that moment, Marcus's eyelids fluttered. Blood ran from his nose into the rainwater. "Get Angela," he murmured. His body went still again. Paramedics arrived within minutes, lifting him into the ambulance. His pulse was shallow, his breathing ragged. The live stream, still running, had already crossed 500,000 live views. Hashtags were forming. The city was waking up. Elena stood in the rain, shaking, watching the taillights of the ambulance fade. She knew this wasn't an accident or a bad judgment call. It was a setup, one that went all the way up. She looked down at her phone, the recording still rolling. Kyle's words still echoing. "Delete the footage. Now. By sunrise." Those 5 minutes under blue and red lights would ignite a storm that Chicago would never forget. By dawn, Chicago was shaking under the weight of what it had just witnessed. The video, 5 minutes of horror under red and blue lights, had traveled faster than any press release or police statement could control. People woke to the sound of outrage buzzing through their phones. On buses, in coffee shops, at schools. The same question repeated in disbelief. Did that really happen to the chief? The footage, grainy but unmistakable, showed Marcus Johnson being dragged, punched, and stomped by 2 of his own officers. His voice, calm at first, then strained with pain, echoed through every feed. "I'm the chief." Yet even as the city mourned, the department went silent. The official statement called it a traffic misunderstanding, but no one bought that lie. Marcus lay motionless in intensive care, tubes running from his mouth and chest, his left side wrapped in white bandages. Every breath was a struggle. The machines around him beeped in uneven rhythm, as though echoing the chaos outside. Doctors said he was lucky to be alive. 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and deep bruising that would take months to heal. Angela Johnson sat beside him, her hands clasped in prayer. She whispered through tears, "You've survived worse, Marcus. You'll survive this too." The nurse looked away, unable to hide the pity in her eyes. For all her years of marriage to a police officer, Angela had never imagined she'd be the one waiting outside his hospital room because of police violence. Elena Ramirez arrived still wearing her soaked uniform from the night before. She had barely slept. When she saw Marcus lying there, her chest tightened. "I recorded everything," she said softly to Angela. "They can't bury it this time." Angela nodded without looking up. "Make sure the right people see it." "Sergeant," outside the room, reporters were already trying to break through hospital security. The story was too big, too shocking, too symbolic to be ignored. Across the city, Ryan Hayes sat alone in his small apartment, blinds closed, television flickering. Every channel showed his face. Every commentator called for his arrest. He hadn't eaten. His body ached from adrenaline withdrawal, his mind from guilt he refused to name. On his kitchen counter lay his badge, still wet from rain, beside a half-empty bottle of whiskey. He replayed the video on mute, watching himself drag Marcus from the car, shouting words he couldn't take back. The uniform that once made him proud now felt like a costume soaked in disgrace. His phone buzzed. Kyle Bennett calling. Ryan let it ring twice before answering. "You told me he was just some guy." He snapped. Kyle's voice was calm, cold. "And you believed me. Don't talk on the phone again." The line went dead. Kyle had problems of his own. He was at the precinct, sitting in a dark corner of the tech room, deleting body cam files frame by frame. The footage could bury him, and the arms trafficking network he was running inside the department. He wiped his forehead, whispering to himself, "No trace, no case." But when he heard the door open behind him, his heart jumped. Elena stood there, phone in hand, camera recording. "What are you doing?" "Bennett?" she asked. Kyle froze. "Routine maintenance." She took a step closer. "You're deleting evidence." His eyes darted to the screen, then back at her. "Watch your tone." "Sergeant, you don't know who you're messing with." Elena didn't flinch. "I know exactly who I'm messing with. The reason our city's dying from the inside, while the department scrambled to contain the disaster. Jamal Carter, the Uber passenger who'd streamed the video, was hiding at his cousin's apartment. His live stream had hit nearly 1 million views in less than 2 days. Reporters flooded his inbox. Activists called him a hero. Strangers called him a liar. He'd already received 3 threats on anonymous accounts. "You think you're safe?" One message said, "We know where you live." Jamal turned on his phone camera again and recorded himself. His voice was steady, but his eyes told the truth of his fear. "If anything happens to me," he said, "the full footage goes to every outlet in the country." Then he uploaded it to an encrypted drive and sent copies to 3 journalists he trusted. At City Hall, Mayor Sarah Wilkins faced a storm of microphones and flashing cameras. She stood stiffly behind a podium, makeup cracking under bright lights. The city of Chicago is deeply troubled by the events involving Chief Marcus Johnson. She began. "A full investigation is underway." Her words sounded rehearsed, bloodless, when a reporter shouted, "Will you resign if he dies?" She froze, lips tightening. "No further comments," she said, and walked off stage to a chorus of boos. By midday, protests filled the streets. The rain had stopped, but anger poured freely. Crowds gathered outside police headquarters, waving signs that read, "Justice for Marcus" and "No badge above the law." Some knelt in silence. Others shouted until their throats went raw. Elena stood at the back of the crowd, hood up, watching the sea of faces. For the first time, She saw what Marcus had fought for his entire career. Accountability that didn't depend on who wore the uniform. Inside the hospital. Marcus stirred. His eyelids twitched. His hand moved slightly. Angela called the doctor, tears flooding her eyes. "Marcus, can you hear me?" she whispered. He blinked once, then again. A few seconds later, his lips moved beneath the oxygen mask. The nurse leaned closer. His voice was weak, barely audible. "File? In the car," he murmured. Angela frowned. "What file?" He tried to lift his hand, but couldn't. "Bennett," he whispered. "Find Bennett." The machines beeped faster, his breathing turning shallow again. Angela gripped his hand tighter. "Rest, please," she said. But Marcus's eyes stayed open, filled with a fire that hadn't dimmed. Across town. Kyle sat in his car, parked under a viaduct. He scrolled through news articles, each one sealing his fate. Officer Bennett under investigation for possible cover-up. He tossed the phone aside and lit a cigarette. The smoke burned his throat, but he didn't care. His world was shrinking fast. One hard drive, one leak, one confession away from collapse. His mind replayed Marcus's words before the beating. "You're walking into something you don't understand." Maybe the chief had been right. Maybe he had understood too much. At 8:47 p.m., a new piece of evidence surfaced online. A hacker calling himself Southside Ghost posted screenshots of recovered CPD messages. They showed Ryan and Kyle exchanging racist jokes, mocking supervisors, and discussing how to teach lessons to mouthy drivers. One message made the nation's stomach turn. "He thinks being chief makes him untouchable. We'll remind him who runs the streets." The screenshots went viral within minutes. The department couldn't deny it anymore. That night, the FBI arrived at the precinct with federal warrants. Agents in black jackets moved through the hallways, collecting drives and files while officers watched in silence. Elena handed over her phone, still containing Kyle's voice saying, "Delete the footage." An agent nodded. "You did the right thing." She didn't answer. She just stared at her badge, wondering when doing the right thing had become the most dangerous act of all. By midnight, the hospital was quiet. The protests had turned into vigils outside. Hundreds stood in the street, holding candles, whispering prayers, the faint smell of wax and rain mixing in the air. Inside, Marcus finally opened his eyes fully. He turned his head toward Angela, his voice barely more than a breath. "Tell them," he said. "I'm not done yet." She nodded through tears, understanding what he meant. The fight wasn't over, it had only just begun. And as Chicago fell into uneasy sleep, somewhere in the darkness, a rookie cop sat trembling. A sergeant hid a copy of a recording in her locker, and a city waited to see what kind of justice would rise when the blue and red lights faded. The footage had reached 1 million views in just 48 hours, and by then, Chicago had turned into a boiling pot of rage and disbelief. Every television network replayed the same 5 minutes. Chief Marcus Johnson bleeding on the pavement while rookie officer Ryan Hayes and his partner Kyle Bennett shouted commands that no one believed. The sound of Marcus's voice, soft, weary, yet dignified, echoed through the nation. "I'm the chief." That line had already become a rallying cry. Outside City Hall, hundreds gathered with candles and signs, chanting it over and over, as though it were a prayer and a warning at once. #Justice. For Marcus filled every corner of social media. Reporters flew in from New York, D.C., and Los Angeles, turning South Side Chicago into a living courtroom. Inside the precinct, officers avoided eye contact, whispering that the department would never be the same again. Angela Johnson hadn't left her husband's side since the night of the attack. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and coffee, the kind that kept grief awake. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, his breathing uneven but his mind still sharp when he surfaced. Angela watched the news play on a small television in the corner of the room. Every segment ended with the same question: how could this happen to the city's own chief of police? When civil rights attorney David Thompson walked in, his presence shifted the air, tall, bald, thin from chemotherapy, but with a voice that still carried the weight of a courtroom. He greeted her gently. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "I know it's soon, but we have to move fast. They're already spinning the story." She looked at him with a teacher's calm fury. "Then spin it back," she said. "My husband deserves the truth, and this city deserves it too." David had seen police brutality cases before, 7, in fact, but none like this. Usually the victims were nameless, their stories buried beneath headlines that faded within a week. But this was the chief. This was the man who had built the department's reform task force, who had spent years trying to break the silence from within. David set down his briefcase and opened a file. Ryan Hayes. He said, 8 months on the job, 5 internal complaints, all dismissed, one from a black teenager who said he pulled a gun during a stop and called him boy. No follow-up, no discipline. Angela closed her eyes, trying not to scream. "And Kyle?" she asked. "Worse," David said, "connected to an internal investigation about missing firearms." But the report vanished. Meanwhile, the mayor was drowning. Sarah Wilkins had built her political career on police loyalty, but loyalty now looked like complicity. Every journalist who came near her office asked the same questions she couldn't answer. Did she know about the arms trafficking ring? Did she ignore the complaints? Did she approve the promotions that placed Ryan and Kyle together at an emergency council meeting? She tried to steady her voice. "Chicago will cooperate fully with federal investigators," she said. "We will hold those responsible to account," but behind her podium, her hands were shaking. Her deputy leaned over and whispered. "They're calling for your resignation," she whispered back. "Not yet. Not until I know what they've got on me." At the same time, Sergeant Elena Ramirez was working in silence. She hadn't turned in the recording yet. The clip of Kyle ordering, "Delete the footage," was her insurance. She knew it would expose him, but she also knew what happened to officers who crossed the wrong people. She'd already received one anonymous text. "Keep your mouth shut, Ramirez, or you'll be next." Still, she pressed on. She met with David in a diner on Pulaski Road, handing him a flash drive under the table. "Everything's on there," she said. His voice, the timestamp, the cover-up. David took it carefully. "You understand this? Puts a target on your back." She nodded. "I've had one since I joined the force. By Friday afternoon, the city was split in two. On one side were those who saw Marcus Johnson as a hero, a man who stood for integrity in a department rotting from within. On the other were officers who called him a traitor, claiming he'd brought the chaos on himself by turning against his own. The police union held a press conference defending Ryan Hayes, calling him a young officer caught in a tragic misunderstanding, their spokesperson said. He feared for his life during the stop. The lie spread like smoke. Commentators debated, politicians argued, and the truth drowned beneath noise. But not everyone was fooled. Jamal Carter, still in hiding, went live again from an undisclosed location. "They said he resisted?" he said to the camera, his eyes red from exhaustion. "Watch the footage." He never raised a hand. The man was trying to breathe. His words cut through the digital fog. Within hours, protesters filled Michigan Avenue. The crowd was larger this time. Students, veterans, mothers pushing strollers, even retired officers marching in silence. They carried signs with Marcus's face, his quote, and a new message beneath: "Cameras don't lie, people do." At the hospital that night, Marcus finally woke fully for the first time. He blinked against the soft glow of fluorescent light. Angela leaned close, whispering, "You're safe." He nodded weakly, his voice rasping. "No one's safe. Not yet." She squeezed his hand, tears threatening to fall. "David's taking your case." Elena gave him the evidence. He tried to sit up but grimaced from the pain. "They'll come after her," he said. "Protect her." Angela nodded. "We will." Then his eyes turned toward the ceiling, far away. "They broke more than bones," he murmured. "They broke the illusion that we were past this." The next day, David held a press conference outside the courthouse. His voice was clear, unshaken by illness or intimidation. "We will file a federal civil rights lawsuit on behalf of Chief Marcus Johnson and his family." He announced, "This is not only about two rogue officers, it's about a department that looked away. It's about a system that punishes silence but protects brutality." Cameras flashed, one reporter asked. "Are you seeking damages?" David nodded. $10 million. Half in compensation, half in punitive damages. But no dollar can repair what was broken here. Back at the precinct. Kyle Bennett watched the press conference from his office. Sweat dripped down his temples. He'd been suspended but not yet charged. Every hour felt like borrowed time. He called Ryan 3 times that day. No answer. When he finally reached him that night, Ryan's voice sounded slurred and hollow. "They know everything." "Kyle," he said, "I can't sleep. I see his face every time I close my eyes." Kyle's tone was cold. "Then don't close them." He hung up, lit another cigarette, and stared out the window as rain streaked down the glass. Saturday evening, thousands gathered at Millennium Park for a candlelight vigil. It was quiet at first. Just soft music, the sound of rain dripping off umbrellas, and Angela's steady voice from the microphone. "My husband believed in the badge," she said. "He believed it could stand for justice, not fear. But tonight, we know that belief is fragile. We must protect it together." The crowd clapped slowly, then cheered. The candles flickered like small flames of defiance against the darkness. That night, the mayor's office received confirmation that federal investigators were moving in. Subpoenas were issued for body cam logs, text messages, and deleted files. The department's walls, once built on silence, began to crack. Officers whispered that the FBI had a copy of everything. Kyle panicked, deleting more data, unaware that Elena's backup had already been sent to Washington. By Sunday morning, the city was no longer in denial. Chicago had seen what it was not supposed to see. A black police chief beaten nearly to death by men sworn to serve under him. It was no longer about one traffic stop. It was about a mirror reflecting every injustice the city had buried for decades. And though Marcus still lay in a hospital bed, his eyes open, his breath shallow, a storm had already begun to move through every level of power. Justice was coming, slow but unstoppable, carried by the weight of one truth. The world had finally watched, and this time, it wasn't looking away. The days that followed were a blur of secrets, fear, and unraveling lies. Chicago's air was heavy, as if the city itself was holding its breath. In public, the mayor's office promised transparency. Behind closed doors, files were shredded, hard drives wiped, and phones mysteriously lost. Every department meeting ended with lawyers whispering warnings, "Don't talk to the press, don't talk to the feds." But the truth had already leaked through too many cracks. Sergeant Elena Ramirez knew it was only a matter of time before someone tried to silence her too. She was living on black coffee and adrenaline, moving carefully between her apartment and the precinct. Every night, she backed up her recordings twice, one copy in her locker, one hidden in a safe deposit box, and every morning, she received a new threat on her phone. "We know what you did. You'll lose your badge for this." The fear was real, but the cause was stronger. She had promised Marcus Johnson's wife that she would protect the evidence, and she wasn't about to break that promise now. Ryan Hayes, meanwhile, was collapsing under his own guilt and paranoia. His face had become a national symbol of disgrace, played on every talk show, every news crawl, every social feed. He stopped going outside, too afraid of the cameras, too haunted by the silence that followed his name. His father, once a proud Chicago cop, had publicly disowned him, calling him a coward who disgraced the uniform. Ryan drank constantly to drown the noise, but the noise never stopped. He saw Marcus's face in every reflection, heard his voice in every creak of the apartment. One night, drunk and desperate, he called Kyle Bennett. "I can't do this anymore," he said. Kyle's tone was icy. "Do what?" "Lie," Ryan said, his words slurred. "You said it was just a scare. You said no one would get hurt." Kyle exhaled slowly. "You think the city cares about you? They'll bury you before they bury me." Then he hung up. Kyle was losing control too, though he'd never admit it. He had always believed himself untouchable, a master of the system he helped corrupt. For years. He'd been running a small but lucrative arms network, moving seized weapons out of evidence storage and into the streets through third-party contractors. It was easy money until Marcus Johnson started asking questions. Marcus had connected the dots, missing serial numbers, unlogged seizures, falsified paperwork, and now Kyle's world was closing in. The federal subpoenas had arrived, and the investigators were picking apart every document. He could feel the walls tightening, the oxygen thinning. Still, he refused to go down quietly. He reached out to an old contact in internal affairs named Monroe, the same man who'd helped cover his tracks years before. "I need a favor," Kyle said over the phone. "The files. Everything Marcus had on me. It's still out there." Monroe's voice was dry. "Then find it before the Bureau does." But Elena had already found it. She met with David Thompson in the back booth of a quiet restaurant near Union Station. Rain tapped against the window as she slid a thin envelope across the table. Inside were photos, ledgers, and a flash drive. This is what he was carrying that night. She said, "The original report Marcus compiled on the arms ring. Kyle's name is all over it." David studied the papers, his hands trembling slightly. "This is enough to bury them," he said. "But it'll bury you too if you're not careful." Elena managed a tired smile. "I've been buried in silence for years. Counselor, I'd rather go down fighting." At the same time, a new attack was underway, not on the streets, but online. Late Friday night, a hacker using the alias Southside Ghost posted a series of encrypted messages claiming to have cracked the police department's internal cloud. Within hours, screenshots appeared showing 47 text exchanges between Ryan Hayes and Kyle Bennett, messages laced with racism, arrogance, and cold intent. One in particular shook the city. "Chief thinks he's a hero. Let's remind him who runs this city." Another, "If we rough him up a little, maybe he'll back off the investigation." The screenshots spread like wildfire. Reporters confirmed the metadata was authentic. It was no longer a question of guilt. It was a countdown to justice. Mayor Sarah Wilkins watched her career implode in real time. Her own emails were now under review after whispers emerged that she'd received campaign donations from consultants tied to the same gun distributors Kyle was protecting. Her chief of staff told her to get ahead of the scandal, but Sarah refused. "I've served this city for 20 years. She said, "I won't step down over rumors." But by that afternoon, protesters had surrounded City Hall, chanting her name alongside the officers. Wilkins knew. Clean house now. She looked out her office window at the crowd below, thousands of people she'd once called her voters, and knew her time was running out. Back at the hospital, Marcus Johnson was growing stronger, though each breath still carried pain. He'd watched the protests from his hospital bed, his wife holding the tablet for him. "You started something," Angela whispered. "Something bigger than both of us." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "They started it. I'm just finishing what they began." His voice was hoarse, but his resolve had returned. When David arrived that evening, Marcus insisted on speaking. "I want to testify." He said, "You're not ready." David replied, "You've got broken ribs and half a lung." Marcus met his eyes. "And I've got a department that's bleeding from the inside. My body will heal. The truth won't wait." Jamal Carter, the man who filmed it all, had gone into hiding under federal protection. But even in seclusion, his story reached the world. He gave his first interview via video call, face shadowed for safety. "I didn't mean to be a hero," he said. "I just couldn't look away." He told the reporter about the night he recorded the live stream, about watching the chief crumble under the weight of those blows, and about the moment he realized what he'd captured. "I thought I was filming another beating," he said. "Turns out I was filming history." His words resonated. Within a day, donations poured in to cover his legal fees and relocation. America had chosen its witness, and his testimony was unstoppable the following week. Kyle's fear turned to desperation. He met Ryan in an abandoned parking lot behind a shuttered bar on the west side. The city lights barely touched them. Ryan looked gaunt, hollow-eyed, clutching a half-empty bottle. "You ruined my life," he said, voice shaking. "You told me it'd be fine." Kyle smirked, trying to keep control. "You wanted in, remember? You wanted to be respected." Ryan's voice rose. "I wanted to be a cop, not a criminal." He pulled out his phone. "The feds called me. They want me to talk." Kyle lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "You talk, and you die broke." Ryan yanked free. "I already am." He got into his car and drove off into the night. By morning, Ryan had checked himself into a federal holding facility under witness protection. His statement was scheduled for Monday. The dominoes were ready to fall when word reached Kyle. He smashed his phone against the wall, his last bit of control shattering with it. That evening, Elena met with Marcus once more. He was sitting upright now, pale but alert. "You were right," she said. "They'll burn the whole department to save themselves." Marcus looked at her with quiet gratitude. "Then let's make sure the fire hits the right hands." Outside, the city buzzed with anticipation. The leaks, the lies, the betrayals. All of it was coming to light. The people had taken back the narrative, and for the first time, the blue wall was starting to crack. The men who thought they ran the streets were about to face the one thing they couldn't outrun, the truth under oath. And as the skyline glowed against the night, Chicago braced itself for a trial that would test not just its justice system, but its soul. The trial began on a gray Monday morning, the kind of morning when the city seemed to hold its breath. Federal Courthouse, room 2119, packed beyond capacity. Reporters filled every seat. The hallway outside crowded with protesters holding signs that read, "Cameras don't lie and justice for Marcus." Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed above a sea of tense faces. Chief Marcus Johnson sat at the plaintiff's table beside attorney David Thompson, his posture straight despite the stiffness in his ribs. Across the room, Ryan Hayes stared down at the table, hands trembling, his suit hanging loose from weight loss. Kyle Bennett sat beside him, pale and alert, his lawyer whispering every few seconds. The judge entered. The room rose. It had taken months to reach this day, and the nation was watching. David opened with calm precision. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, voice steady but firm, "you will see a video, 5 minutes long. In those 5 minutes, you will watch 2 police officers assault their superior officer, your city's chief of police. You will hear him identify himself. You will see him beg for breath, and you will watch them keep going. His words landed like quiet hammers. This case is about more than brutality. It is about betrayal. From within the badge itself. The defense tried to frame it as confusion. A late-night stop gone wrong. Ryan's attorney, a young man named Whitaker, insisted his client feared for his life. He thought the chief was an armed suspect. He said, it was raining, dark, chaotic. The jury's faces told the truth. No one believed it. Then came the moment that stripped away every excuse. David pressed play on the courtroom screen. The room fell silent as the video began. Rain glinting in the headlights. Marcus's calm voice saying, "Officer, I'm the chief." Then the shove, the punches, the blood, the final blow. Even the sound of rain couldn't mask the horror. Several jurors looked away. One woman covered her mouth. When the video ended, the room stayed silent for nearly 30 seconds before the judge spoke. Proceed. Next came the body cam footage Elena had recovered. The video played Ryan yelling, "Stop resisting," over and over. Yet Marcus never moved to fight back. Then, after the assault, Kyle's voice clearly said, "Delete the footage, now." Elena sat in the witness box, eyes fixed on the defense table. That was his voice, she said, pointing to Kyle. "I was there. He ordered it." The defense objected. The judge overruled. "Let the record show," she said. "Sergeant Ramirez has confirmed the voice identification." Kyle's mask began to crack. His lawyer whispered frantically. "But the damage was done," Elena continued, explaining how Marcus had been investigating missing weapons before the attack. She described the night of the incident, the rain, the chaos, the moment she saw her chief on the ground. "He wasn't just my boss," she said quietly. "He was the one man trying to clean up this department." Then Jamal Carter took the stand. The crowd leaned forward. He wore a dark suit, his voice measured, eyes weary but steady. "I was in the Uber," he said. "I saw everything. I streamed it because I didn't think anyone would believe it without proof." The prosecutor asked, "Did you know who the man was at first?" Jamal shook his head. "No. But when I heard him say he was the chief, I froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing." David played a short segment of Jamal's live stream, the sound of his voice trembling as he whispered, "They're beating someone. Oh my God, that's Chief Marcus Johnson." The courtroom fell silent again. By the second day, the defense was desperate. Kyle's attorney tried to discredit the footage, suggesting tampering. David rose calmly, holding up a printed copy of the chain of custody report signed by federal agents. "Every frame was verified," he said, "and we have metadata showing Officer Bennett himself attempted to delete it." He displayed the recovered text messages between Ryan and Kyle, courtesy of the hacker known as Southside Ghost. The courtroom screen filled with their words, lines soaked in racism and arrogance. "He thinks being chief makes him untouchable. We'll show him." Gasps filled the room. Kyle's lawyer tried to object again, but it was futile. The jury had read the truth. On the third day, Ryan broke. He had refused to testify at first, fearing perjury, but the weight of his conscience and the mountain of evidence finally cracked him. Under oath. He spoke haltingly, his voice thin and defeated. "I was drunk," he said. "Kyle told me to make the stop. He said the chief was dirty. I just wanted to prove myself." His lawyer buried his face in his hands. David's tone was controlled but sharp. "Did you know it was the chief?" "Yes," Ryan whispered. "I knew. I didn't care. I thought I was doing the right thing." The room stayed silent as he spoke, every word another nail in his own coffin. Then came the most devastating testimony, Marcus himself. The courtroom rose as he walked in, still moving carefully, every step slow but deliberate. He wore his dark suit, his police pin on the lapel, his jaw still stiff from the fracture. When he reached the stand, he paused, looking directly at the jurors. I gave my life to that department. He said softly. I believed in it even when it didn't believe in me. That night, I wasn't just a man beaten on the street. I was the symbol of every black citizen who's been told to obey first. Speak later. His voice trembled once, but he continued. When I said, I'm the chief. I wasn't pleading for special treatment. I was pleading for humanity. Several jurors wiped their eyes. Even the judge shifted uncomfortably. When closing arguments began, David's words were steady as stone. This case isn't about revenge, he said. It's about responsibility. The badge is supposed to mean honor, but when that badge is used as a weapon, it loses all meaning. Chief Johnson didn't just survive an assault. He survived a betrayal by the very system he swore to uphold. He turned to the jury. Now it's your turn to uphold something. The truth. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Outside, thousands gathered in the rain again, waiting. Reporters stood ready, cameras aimed at the courthouse doors. When the clerk finally read the verdict, the city seemed to exhale all at once. Ryan Hayes, guilty on all counts, assault under color of authority, civil rights violation, and obstruction. Kyle Bennett, guilty on conspiracy, evidence tampering, and accessory to attempted murder. The jury awarded Marcus Johnson $10 million, $5 million compensatory, $5 million punitive. Gasps filled the courtroom. Angela pressed her hand to her face, sobbing quietly. Elena leaned forward, whispering a silent thank you. As the officers were led away in handcuffs, Marcus didn't look at them. He kept his gaze on the judge, on the seal of justice above her head. The cameras outside captured his quiet exit, his steps slow but unbroken. Reporters shouted questions, but he didn't stop. He only said one thing before stepping into the rain. Cameras don't lie. People do. That night, the headlines echoed across the country. Chief Johnson wins historic civil rights case. Chicago officers convicted in brutality trial. But for Marcus, it wasn't victory. It was survival. The reform had begun, but the wounds were far from healed. And as he stood at his hospital window later that night, watching the city lights flicker, he knew the hardest work was still ahead. The trial was over. The reckoning had just begun. The months after the verdict brought no peace, only the quiet exhaustion that follows a storm. Justice had been delivered in the courtroom, but the city Marcus Johnson had sworn to protect was still bleeding. The news of the $10 million settlement made headlines. But behind the scenes, the scars ran deeper. Ryan Hayes began his 24-month federal sentence at FCI Oxford, a low-security prison in Wisconsin. He arrived thinner, pale, and hollow-eyed, carrying nothing but his Bible and the regret that came too late. He was beaten twice in his first week by inmates who recognized him from the viral video. By the second month, he had filed for bankruptcy. His wife filed for divorce soon after, taking their daughter to her parents' home in Michigan in January. Guards found Ryan unconscious in his cell after swallowing a bottle of painkillers. He survived but was placed under constant observation. When he was released a year later, no police department would hire him. He took a job as a mall security guard in Gary, Indiana. Uniform without authority, badge without meaning. Sometimes, customers recognized him. He learned to keep his head down. Kyle Bennett fared no better. His cooperation at trial had reduced his sentence to 18 months. But freedom did not bring redemption. His wife left him. The courts took custody of his son. The old connections that once protected him vanished overnight. Within 6 months of release, he was back on the streets, jobless, addicted, and sleeping under the viaduct off 79th Street where he once patrolled. Reporters found him there one winter morning, wrapped in a torn blanket. When asked if he regretted what happened, Kyle said nothing. He only stared at the concrete, muttering. It was supposed to be just a stop. His silence said the rest. Mayor Sarah Wilkins's fall came slower but just as hard. The federal probe into campaign donations uncovered financial ties to the gun distributors Marcus had been investigating, though never criminally charged. Her political career was over. She resigned 3 months after the trial. Her final speech drowned by protesters shouting for reform. Her name was removed from the police reform committee she'd once chaired. By summer, she had disappeared from public life, leaving behind a city desperate to believe the worst was finally over. Marcus Johnson refused to retire quietly. The injuries had left him weaker, but his voice had grown stronger. The settlement money became the seed for something greater. The Justice Legacy Fund, dedicated to victims of wrongful police conduct and community surveillance initiatives. The first project installed 200 public cameras across the South Side, independent of police control, managed by neighborhood councils. "If the system can watch us," Marcus said at the ribbon cutting, "then we can watch the system too." His words echoed across the nation. Within months, similar programs appeared in Detroit, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. Elena Ramirez was promoted to deputy chief, the first Latina to hold the title in Chicago's history. Her courage during the investigation made her a reluctant hero. She restructured the department's internal review board, bringing in civilian oversight and mandatory bias audits. Yet even she knew reform was fragile. Every week, another complaint crossed her desk, another reminder that culture does not change with a verdict. Still, she pressed on. "We owe him that much," she said in interviews. Not just Marcus. The idea of what he stood for, Jamal Carter's life transformed completely. His book, I Filmed the Truth, became a bestseller and was later adapted into a documentary. Time magazine named him Person of the Year, calling his act the click that changed Chicago, but fame brought guilt. "I didn't save him," Jamal said in an interview. "I just recorded what the world refused to see." He used his platform to advocate for transparency laws and citizen oversight, insisting every bystander had the right to film police interactions without interference. His quiet determination turned him into a national voice for accountability. For Marcus, the months after the trial were a paradox of healing and mourning. The Justice Legacy Fund grew beyond expectation. Donations from across the country, partnerships with civil rights groups, and even a grant from the Department of Justice. Yet every success reminded him of the night that birthed it. He often returned to that intersection on 79th Street, standing silently beneath the same flickering light where he was beaten. Reporters once asked why. He answered simply, "Because I lived where too many didn't." Ryan's failed suicide attempt became a headline for a week, then faded. Kyle's overdose months later barely made the papers, but Marcus didn't celebrate their ruin. When asked about it, he said, "Justice isn't vengeance, it's balance. And sometimes balance takes everything from everyone." His humility made him respected even among those who once doubted him. In the spring, Marcus was invited to speak before the National Police Conference in Washington, D.C. The hall was filled with chiefs, cadets, and policymakers. He walked slowly to the podium, the faint scar along his lip catching the light. Cameras flashed, but he ignored them. "We wear these uniforms," he began, "to protect what's right, not to hide what's wrong. The badge doesn't make us immune from judgment. It binds us to it." His speech ended with quiet applause that swelled into a standing ovation. Yet as he stepped off the stage, he saw a young officer in the hallway quietly removing his body cam battery before heading out on patrol. Marcus stopped, watching. He said nothing, only closed his eyes for a moment. The cycle, it seemed, still lived in shadows. That night, as the city lights of Chicago glimmered far away, Marcus sat in his office, looking out over the skyline. Justice had come, but not closure. The wounds were too deep, the system too vast. Still, he believed progress was possible, slow, imperfect, but real. The world had watched him fall and rise again, and in that story, He hoped others might find courage to stand. Outside. Sirens echoed faintly, red and blue lights painting the walls once more. He whispered to himself the words that had carried him through every trial. Cameras don't lie. People do. Then he turned off the light and went back to work. The morning after the conference speech, Chicago woke under a pale sunrise, the skyline still damp with fog, for the first time in years. The streets felt quiet, not peaceful, but watchful, as though the city itself were deciding what kind of place it wanted to be. Chief Marcus Johnson walked slowly through his old precinct, the one where it had all begun. Officers nodded with respect now, some out of guilt, others out of fear. But Marcus knew change wasn't about silence. It was about courage. The Justice Legacy Fund had started to take root. Community patrols, body cam transparency, civilian review panels. But deep down, he understood reform was never permanent. It had to be fought for daily, breath by breath. Outside the precinct, murals of him had begun to appear. Marcus with his badge held high under rain-streaked lights. Jamal Carter painted one of them himself, on the same corner where he'd filmed the attack. He said it wasn't about hero worship. It was about memory. People forget too easily. Jamal told a reporter, "This wall will remind them that truth needs witnesses." His book had sold 500,000 copies, and his documentary had just won an award at Sundance. But fame had not softened him. He still spent weekends teaching Southside teens how to film safely and protect their footage. "The phone is the new shield," he said. "You hold it steady, and the world sees what power tries to hide." Elena Ramirez was now deputy chief, and her office overlooked the same district she once patrolled in a squad car. She carried herself differently, not with pride, but with gravity. Every decision came with a moral echo. How much could be fixed, and how much would only repeat. She met with Marcus twice a week, updating him on the progress of the consent decree expansion, the disciplinary reviews, the mentorship program for new recruits. "We're improving," she said one afternoon, "but we're still bleeding trust." Marcus looked out the window, his voice low. "Then stop patching wounds. Start healing the cause." Ryan Hayes was released from prison that same month. He looked older than his 30 years, beard unkempt, eyes sunken. No department would touch him, no neighborhood wanted him. He found work at a security firm in Gary, watching empty hallways through dusty monitors. Sometimes. At night. He turned on the old footage, the video that had ruined him, and stared at the frozen image of his own rage. He no longer recognized the man on screen. Once, he told a fellow guard, "I thought I was serving justice, turns out. I was running from it." A week later. He quietly moved away, leaving no address behind. Kyle Bennett didn't live long after release. Addiction consumed what prison had left undone. He was found beneath a bridge that winter, his body identified only by a faded police tattoo. When reporters asked Marcus for comment, he refused. Later, in private, he said, "There's no satisfaction in watching a man destroy himself. Accountability isn't revenge. It's the line between truth and hate." Angela Johnson spent her time managing the Justice Legacy Fund's scholarship program, offering grants to families affected by police violence. She often reminded Marcus that survival carried a responsibility greater than memory. "You didn't just live through it," she told him. "You lived so others could believe again." Together, they built partnerships with universities, training programs, and mental health services for officers and citizens alike. The year closed with a ceremony at City Hall. Mayor Wilkins's replacement, a young reform candidate, declared October 17th, the night of the traffic stop, as Justice Legacy Day. Schools held assemblies, officers spoke at community centers, and the city pledged to reduce racial disparities in stops by 50% within 3 years. It was a start, fragile but real. That evening, Marcus stood alone outside his car at the same intersection where it all began. The street was dry now, the lamplight steady, across the way. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors, officers, reporters, all waiting for him to speak. He didn't bring notes. He simply said, "Every city has two lights, blue and red. One warns, one protects. But for too long, they've blurred together until people can't tell which is which. Our job is to separate them again, to make justice shine brighter than fear." His words lingered in the cool night air as the crowd applauded. Marcus looked down the block and saw a new patrol car parked under the same flickering lamp. A rookie sat inside, checking his gear. For a brief moment, Marcus thought he saw the young man reach for his body cam switch, then hesitate, leaving it off. The old ache returned. Change, he knew, wasn't a victory march. It was a cycle that demanded vigilance. He turned to Elena beside him. "Promise me something," he said quietly. "Never let the light go out." She nodded. "Not on my watch." Later that night, back in his office, Marcus opened the window and listened to the city hum. Sirens, laughter, footsteps, all the sounds of a city learning to breathe again. On his desk sat the gavel he'd received from a community coalition, engraved with the words, "Truth has no badge." He smiled faintly, turned off the lamp, and whispered into the silence. "Cameras don't lie. People do. But sometimes, people learn." The story of Chief Marcus Johnson became a lesson taught in police academies nationwide, not as tragedy, but as proof of endurance. Reform spread city by city, imperfect yet alive, carried by those who refused to forget, and under the lights of Southside Chicago, where rain once turned to blood. The glow that remained was not just red or blue, but something brighter, something earned. Thank you for watching and supporting this story. If you believe in justice and truth, subscribe, like, and tell me where you're watching from. Your voice matters.